out here. Yeah, James doubling up the Clippers. Clean up on aisle three. Clean up on aisle three. Someone call someone because there's a clean up on aisle three as a man is down.
Played by Buffon. And then
Hello people and welcome back to the Outbounds YouTube channel. I'm back with the regular people, Abbas and Sam, Undiluted and Abbas Talks. And yeah, it's the end of a Premier League season, another one, which I am glad to see the back end of it and stuff. Obviously, early apologies because Sam is a busy man, so he's got people playing bingo in his office. That's
it gets like that sometimes. It gets like
that is. But as I said, nevertheless, the show must go on. So, as I mentioned before, the Premier League season's ended. I mean, the title winners or trophy winners, as you all know, Man City, they did the treble. United won the Team Cup, Energy Cup, whatever they call that trophy, Carabao Cup, and the rest of us went trophyless. So, Arsenal fans were all in the same boats. But before we do go on to all the other stuff, we do have to start with Man City because they're just coming off winning the Champions League where they beat Inter Milan. Lukaku, I'll never forgive you. But I don't know. I'm just going to go first, innit? Because even though I haven't asked a question, but I'm just going to speak about Man City and Pep Guardiola because I really truly believe this has been a very, very special season for them. Not even just because they did the treble, which they're now the second team in Premier League in English football to do that after United, if I'm correct. They also three-peated the Premier League. Now, I said, obviously, I remember last season when we were still doing the zone, and I said that if Pep does a three-peat, I do feel this would be the most impressive one because it's only been done twice by United and Sir Alex Ferguson. And that means I would have to, hold my hands up and give him my respect. So, as he's now done that, I'm here to tell you, I'm not giving him respect just yet. But, you know what? Just for now, I can applaud the job that he's done. Because, I mean, three-peat in the Premier League, I think, is one of them. And it gives you the opportunity to build your legacy to go and then do the 4, which I do think will be tough, but you then can go on to do 4 and do 5. And I think it's coming to a point that he's doing something not seen in the Premier League before. And then even just to go with the whole Champions League, obviously Man City always had a stigma, even before Pep came, that they spent all this money, obviously, to win the Premier League, but then they couldn't get out of I think the furthest they reached was the semis where they even got not battered, but they got beat by Real Madrid. So then you got Pep that comes in, then he struggles to win the semis. And I think the way he just kept on being, he never really lost his, I wouldn't trust but composure in press conferences to be like, why you always asking me about, he even jokes about it to be like, it's because I don't have Messi, it's because I don't have this. And to be able to finally get it right, I mean, really and truly, just because I'm shameless, I will try and find a new agenda, but I do feel like there isn't much agendas that you can throw towards this guy, except for maybe it took him too long to do it. But at the end of the day, he did it. So, yeah, that is the little bit of respect I'm going to give Pep. But as I said, don't hold me to all these words too much because there's always a new agenda around the corner. So, Sam, I'll let you take away as you're the City fan. Did you feel like Pep deserves more respect for the job that he's done?
Yeah, like even without the Champions League this season, what he's done, you still need to give him respect. Like you see what he's done at City, Centurion, domestic quadruple, 5 Premier League in 7 seasons. He'd won a back-to-back, and these are the stuff that United fans said that United need to do, City need to do: win a Champions League, win a treble, win a three-peat, win a back-to-back. And he just kept on knocking it off. And I saw the big City fan on Insta saying, Steve-O was basically saying, look, United gave us these challenges that we had to do in terms of what they'd done. Now United need to catch up with City. United have never had a 100-point season. They need to do that. They need to finish above City. They haven't finished above City in the last 11 years. It's a shambles. Do a domestic quadruple. So you have to give Pep his dues in terms of what he's done as a footballer, football manager, and also just as a coach. Like people will start using narrative. Well, Fergie's treble was better than Pep's because he did it with youngsters. But again, that's an X because Pep did the same thing with Barcelona. He won it with players from La Masia. So like you can't keep on changing narrative and pushing the goalposts. And then also you just look at what influence Pep has had on the game of football in terms of everybody wants to play at the back. You could be in League One or watching a League Two game, everybody wants to play at the back. And I'm not doing this comparison about what Fergie did and Pep did, but as a coach and a manager, Pep just had so much influence that even if he didn't win this this Premier, I'm so excited. If he didn't win this Champions League, you will still have to give him his dues, isn't it? But he's got the icing on the cake, the cherry on the cake, and that's just ticked it off where Richard was one of the big naysayers. He can't do it without Messi, and he's done it. So what are you going to say now? He can't do it without spending billions. Like, it doesn't make sense. So everyone needs to get off Pep's back. He's one of the, 3 or 4 managers to win 3 Champions Leagues. Only Ancelotti's won more than him. And if you go into next season, based on everyone's team and their structure, who is the favourites to win the Champions League? It's going to be City because Real Madrid are declining. They're going for a real build. Barcelona, that's my Spanish team. But again, they're a bit in a sticky situation. You got Bayern Munich, they're in a sticky situation as well. And I don't think none of the Premier League teams are going to compete to stop City in the Champions League. So sooner or later, it might just be hands down that Pep is the greatest manager ever. So long story short, Pep's that guy, man. I don't want to hear no one talking about any...
Ancelotti?
Yeah, why not? Ancelotti's won, 4 Champions League. So if Pep wins another one, he's won 4. Cool. But in terms of, if you add Champions Leagues, Premier Leagues, other countries, and the influence that Pep's had on the game, Ancelotti can't chat to Pep. What influence did Ancelotti have on football? He was coached by one of the best managers of his time, Arrigo Sacchi, and he didn't really take Arrigo Sacchi's philosophies and take it to a next level. Pep was coached by Johan Cruyff that loved total football, and Pep has taken that concept of total football and taken it to the next level. You see how we struggled at the beginning of the season, transition from, that 3 that 4 at the back that goes into 3, the inverted right back. He saw it was working for a little bit. It didn't work. Let Cancelo go. Tried it with Stones at right back. Unfortunately, to make it more conducive and easier to do, let's do it from centre back. He tried it with Rodri against Chelsea, but you can't really do that with Rodri because Rodri's a great pivot player. So you put Rodri in the pivot, and then you have your actual 4 centre backs, and then it allows you to push Stones up into the middle. So you have your 3-2-2, the box midfield, and your 3 attacking players, and then you got numerical advantage in the middle. So look, I'll let Abbas go because I don't seem like I'm just talking, but Pep is that guy. Simple as.
I mean, look, I said it from day one.
Boo.
Like, he's the greatest manager ever in football. Like, there's not a debate. There never really was a debate. People try to make it a debate. When you start making something a debate, you already know you kind of lost because you shouldn't have to debate something that's so easy to see. And it was so easy to see that Pep was the greatest ever, but you had to then put in people or managers who had 6 years before they even won something, or whatever you want to say, who finished 11th in the first few seasons at a club, who won a treble where your team scored in the 90th minute and then in the 93rd. So basically, yeah, you might have been good leading up to it, but you ragged your way to that because that's a raggy way to win a tournament. Like, it's a bit of luck, and you need that luck to win stuff, but that's basically it. City, if you look at this entire season, there's not really, let's just break the Champions League, there's not really any sort of luck that City got in the Champions League. They basically outplayed everybody they faced. There wasn't a single game where you said,
You're going to play Inter.
I mean, look, that was more cagier as a final, right? Which is fine. Not a problem because it's a one-off game. But realistically, when City were putting on the press, a lot of people thought it was just inevitable they were going to score. And let's not forget that they lost their best playmaker 30 minutes into the game also. So that has some kind of hindrance on the game itself. But as it pertains to Pep, if you're asking whether or not people have been able to give his respect, well, you're an idiot if you didn't give respect to start off with. But then again, at the same time, you're always going to have individuals who will say, "Oh, you can only do it with money. You can only do it with money." Well, yeah, you can only do podcasts with money because at the end of the day, you need money to do something to be able to be good at something, and that's just a natural thing. You need money to be able to be good, and that's no hindrance against any manager. If, for example, when Klopp won the league, he spent a lot of money to get that initially. When Mourinho started off at Chelsea, spent money to get that. When Fergie was being successful, he was breaking British transfer records. Yeah, the fees were not as astronomical as they were, but that's because we were living in a different time. So for me, like, no matter what happens, Pep will always have criticism, even if he wins 4 or 5. Like, he's the favourite to win 4. Like, if he wins 4, that's historical because nobody's ever done that. But he won't get the credit for it because people will turn around and say, "Oh, well, anybody can do it with Haaland up front, or anybody can do it because they spent another 100 million or 150 million in the transfer market," not realizing that they probably recouped a lot of it back by selling certain players, percentage of players. But yeah, like, I honestly think it's the dumbest conversation to have when it comes to Pep because he's the greatest of all time. If you don't want to admit to it, that's your own personal agenda, and you can stick to that because nobody's going to change your mind. Like, nobody, if you can't sit and openly see that Pep's the greatest manager of all time, it's like having a conversation with a brick wall. Like, it doesn't matter how much you go on and on and on, you will still have your beliefs, and you can have that, but your beliefs are incorrect.
Well, one thing I would say now, obviously, I think the case is there. I think if anybody was to make an easy case for Pep Green, the greatest manager of all time, if you want to talk about who's the greatest manager of all time, I do think maybe Pep might be the easier one to make the case for. But I still believe to an extent Fergie, and obviously I'm not going to debate it now because I'm not going to debate it now just because I didn't come prepared. But I do think both Fergie and Ancelotti might still have a claim in those things, in my opinion. As I said, if I go and do research, because just to see what they've done with what Ancelotti did at Milan, coming to Chelsea, going to Madrid, and even the job he did at Everton as well, I do think for him to. I'm just talking about it. I'm not saying. I'm not saying definitively Ancelotti is better than Pep.
Do you know what I'm saying? Ancelotti. This was it. Ancelotti is always that nice sentimental option because the reality is, yeah, he won the Champions Leagues and the way he and what he won with them, but then Champions Leagues were always marred with a bit of controversy or like certain things. Like, I don't know if it was him that won it or Zidane that won it when Juve were 3-0 down, made it 3-3, and then there's a random. Was that Zidane?
Yeah, that was Zidane.
Like, if you look at he won it when Ramos scored that last minute goal, right? And then they went and beat Atletico 4-1, Ancelotti.
Yeah, that was Ancelotti.
Yeah.
If you look at that game, again, there's that element of luck that was needed to be able to get there. And then you play that Atletico. For me, what separates them both is, okay, you can have the Champions League, but the league titles.
That's what I'm about to say as well.
Pep's just miles ahead of Ancelotti when it comes to that. With Fergie, it's a different thing because of the time that Fergie had.
But Fergie's is longevity, though. But then you got to look at what Pep has accomplished. If you go and look at the records that Pep's broken in the Premier League, they're crazy. Most number of wins, most numbers of wins in a row, number of goals, centurion, etc.
One thing I would say to that, and by the way, this is not because, as I said, like, for the meantime, I'm leaving my Pep agenda on the door. But what I'm saying in terms of, because you got to remember, I think errors do kind of matter to an extent as well. Now, if you're going to, I think you can argue the Premier League is probably from top to bottom, maybe as competitive as it's ever been. But then if you're just looking at just the top, for example, let's say when Ancelotti won it with Chelsea, you've got the thing of where he was being challenged by a United team that just came off doing coming the three-peat. Now, obviously, no, I'm not saying that disrespect, but I mean, Arsenal bottled it and immediately start putting pressure. Because what I was going to come to is what is going to be the motivating factor for City going into next season. Because I do believe that. I don't know whether it's the transition period or the lack of a bit of motivation coming to the season because they've already won it 4 times in the last 5 years. And when there was a chance Arsenal could win it, then they turned it up and then Arsenal crumbled. Whereas I believe back in the day of when Italy were the one dominating world football, and when he came to Chelsea, and United was still as dominant as ever. If Chelsea of, let's say, 2010, maybe Ancelotti's team, or United of 2009 was in this current system and they had the lead that Arsenal had, I don't think they would bottle it, and then you never know. So I said, by the way, Pep still has to go on a win, and I said it's an incredible achievement because to win 3 in a row and to three-peat, but I do think errors do matter a bit in terms of when you're saying he just went on and he's just getting all these 100 points in terms of the people's like top to bottom. You've got me. I think the Premier League is as competitive as ever. But then, if you're just talking about being top heavy, I do think it's been a lot more competitive.
But then, if he's used that narrative, when Fergie did get a challenge, he didn't always win the league though. That's like when Mourinho came, Fergie couldn't compete. When
Not true.
When Wenger came and he did his thing, he couldn't compete. So we have to look at it like, okay, cool. Fergie was able to dominate when he had a monopoly. When people came and kind of matched his energy, there was some struggles. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not saying Fergie wasn't great, but you got to look at the time that he coached in and he managed in. It was very Man United centric. The same information they used to say, oh, Man City, oh, their titles don't mean anything because they spent money. Like Abbas said, United was spending money at that time. If you go based on inflation, you buying Rio Ferdinand for 30 million is the same as buying Fofana or whatever for 85 million. Or
Jack Grealish.
Yeah, exactly. Or you're buying Van Nistelrooy or Veron at 28 million. Inflation now, it's about 70 million. It's more than Kevin De Bruyne. So I don't think we can always use that narrative. I think a lot of people are jealous because Pep's not their manager, because if he was, they would be saying he's the greatest. Because that's just how everyone is. You look at Pep's impact, Ten Hag, he was assistant and he coached on these under 23s. Gavi, Company, Arteta. There's a legacy that he's leaving. Do you know what I mean? So yes, you can look at what Fergie did, but as an overall holistic approach to coaching and what you bring to the table, Pep just revolutionized the game. Like,
one more question I want to ask just before we move on to the next topic, because unless you guys have different teams, I think in my eyes, probably the top 2 greatest Premier League teams, or I think the top 3 could argue probably the Centurions, one that reached 100 points. I've got United in 08, the one that did the double, and I've got Chelsea in 05, the one that only conceded 15 goals.
Correct.
This current Man City team, so like I'm not talking about in terms of the one they had 2 years ago, I'm just talking about the one played from this season.
You know what?
Do you think these are better than the 2008 United and 05 Chelsea?
So I'm going to just quickly stop you because for me, you know, that first year of Ancelotti 9-10. That was so good. Like we were scoring 5, 6, 7 for fun.
Yeah, but that 05 Chelsea with Robin, Duff, Lampard, Drogba,
McAlady,
like it was something different.
Carvalho.
Remember, it was different because that's the first time we saw 4-3-3 in the Premier League. Like Mourinho brought that from obviously being at Porto, understanding that from Barcelona, what he brought here, then you saw it. And them times, that's why when you hear people say Mourinho's a defensive manager, from those first 2 seasons he had at Chelsea, people don't understand. But after that is when he got pammed 5-0 by Barcelona in the El Clasico. That's when he became very defensive. But prior to that, you were scoring goals, and that season you conceded what, 15 goals? If that's mad. Yeah. 15. That's AC Milan.
And a lot of them were penalties as well. A lot of the goals we considered were penalties as well.
That's what Milan was doing with Baresi and Maldini and Desailly in midfield them time. So I think I agree with Richard. That, don't get me wrong, that 09-10 when you had Deco and them man there and you was scoring goals, I think he scored 109 or something.
That's like what that. I mean. That was like you could turn on Chelsea. They were banging in 5-0.
Yeah, that was a good season. But I think we have to go to the first iteration and go probably say that. Was it 05, 06 or 04, 05?
Yeah.
You man was on smoke. No one wanted to see Chelsea then. Nobody.
So, but that's the thing. So, because I heard a lot of people say maybe this might be because first of all, Sam, just quick yes or no. Do you think this team is even better than the one that reached 100 points?
Do you know what?
The one that had like Aguero and Company and all those guys.
Do you know, it's difficult because if you look at, for example, if you look at De Bruyne then and De Bruyne now, De Bruyne's a much better player, innit? And then you look at who you have in defense. You got Diaz, Laporte, all those guys compared to Otamendi and that. It's a tough one. I don't know, man. I do like this team a lot because of the flexibility that we can do in terms of we can move, put people in different positions. I would just say, based on having as well Haaland, that's a goal machine that we don't want him to get in, drop and be a false nine and be an extra man in midfield. We just want him to stay up top and get tap-ins. I probably would just say this team might be better. You might not see it based on points, but that's based on Pep finding his best team later on in the season. But no, it's 50-50. I can't even answer that question, bro, to be honest.
And do you think they beat the 08 United and 05 Chelsea?
Bro, that 08 United team, don't get me wrong, Tevez, Rooney, Ronaldo, that's their friend.
Carrick, Vidic, Rio.
The midfield was good, but we would have outplayed the midfield. I just think it would have been a battle of attrition. I would still say, based on what Pep's doing now, playing 4 centre-backs that can defend one-on-one, we might have been able to lock down the wingers and we'll just dictate play, control possession. So I still think we would have won. But again, questions. This is like saying, oh, would the 17 Warriors team beat the 96 Bulls? It's all hypothetical questions, isn't it? So obviously I'm going to say yes, but it would have been a great game to watch.
I'd say this. I think this City team would have beaten that United team because of the coaches. Because if you think about it, just a year later, Pep plays, okay, it's Barcelona, but it's his first season at Barcelona. He plays.
Barcelona should not be there, by the way, because they cheats against Chelsea, but continue.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Like, we should have been in that. I know. But that was Pep's first season at Barcelona. He then plays basically that same team, maybe with a couple of changes.
Great point.
He's done quite comfortably in my eyes. So now you take this particular team who is three-peated, the Prem trebled, everything, whatever you want to say, all accolades under the sun, has probably the best goal score, has the best single-handed goal scorer in one season. I think he would have beaten that team. Again, like I said, nostalgia kills people. I always say this. Nostalgia
100%.
kills our people more than anything else in the entire world, where we can't get over the fact that that was our childhood. We grew up watching that type of thing. But yeah, it would have been that. Again, Mourinho is a different thing because I think on paper it probably isn't playing wise, but it's just because of the defensive grittiness of that particular team and how less it conceded. It would be one of them games where there'd be only one goal personally in that game. But overall, I don't know if he's better than that team.
Would it be crazy for me to say? Because obviously Mourinho and Pep were the always ones being compared, especially given what they were doing with their Clasico. Because you had the Ronaldo, Messi, then you got Mourinho. But now, obviously, we're talking about an all-time greatness. Obviously, Pep will be the one because he's accomplished more in a longer amount of time. But I don't know. Some part of me still feels like both at the absolute peak. I still feel like I would take Mourinho as a manager as his absolute peak than over Pep. But that's just me anyway. I said like because you mentioned this as well. Fergie was trying to run the league before Mourinho came and spanked him twice, and obviously it was also then what's his name as well? Sir Alex.
Wenger.
Arsene Wenger, yeah, he didn't even win the league or touch the league anymore after Wenger. Maybe Mourinho psychologically damaged him or something, specialist in failure. I know those things there, and he came to smack him like 6-0 and stuff. So I don't know. Then you can see he went to go and do the treble with Inter, where we mentioned he did beat Pep in the Champions League, where he starts doing the one, and then he goes. I think at that point, I could be wrong. Madrid were like the first team to reach 100 points or something like that in the league, or score 100 goals and stuff. So I don't know. Like, obviously, Mourinho doesn't have the longevity of maybe the Fergie and Pep and stuff, but at his absolute best, I still feel like what he's done to me is more impressive.
But not in a bad way, because it's all about having the best players. But do you think Mourinho at his best was coaching, or just that he had top players? Because when you look at Mourinho, there's no philosophy. Like when you see Pep, there's a philosophy of how he's gonna play stylistically and stuff like that. But when you see Mourinho, whether he's got top players or he hasn't got top players, I can't tell you what his style of play is going to be. So was it based... No, I'm not saying he was, because he was a great manager, but was it like, just go and play? It's like Ancelotti. Ancelotti doesn't have a style of play. It's like, I've got
But
individuals.
Mourinho teams on the counter attack. He was always, Mourinho teams on the counter attack.
But that's my whole point, though. When you play on a counter attack, that means you have to concede possession and sit back. And can you afford to do that against a pet team like this Man City team?
I mean, but it's not necessary because obviously, if you're a good team, you always have like possession, but then you can see the kind of players that he always used to have, like the aggressive. I don't even call him aggressive, but you can see like when he used to have Matic, the big strong guys in midfield and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, after he left Chelsea, partly his fault, partly the bad hand as well. But then you look at the career, like for example, what he did with Roma on the scale of things because of what he is a big accomplishment for Roma because they've not won anything in God knows how many years.
Bro,
You look at Tottenham,
one step away from
winning Europa League as well. You look at United, the biggest thing they've won in like the last 7 years was because Mourinho won it in the Europa League and all that kind of stuff. And even Tottenham as well, they sacked him before he could even play in the finals. So it's one of those things.
I hear what you're saying, but that's Mourinho now? He's got to a stage where he likes to be the underdog, though. It's not, he doesn't want to go to that top team. He wants to go to that underdog and kind of prove
You
a
reckon?
point.
If it was given an opportunity to go to a top team, he wouldn't take it.
But look at the teams he's going to, though. At that time, United wasn't a top team. They were still underdogs. Then you went to Spurs. Spurs were never going to, they were still underdogs. Then you go to Roma. They're not the best team in Serie A, underdogs. Like, he just likes that siege mentality where I can speak to my players and say, nobody likes us, no one expects us to do anything, and then he overachieves. So, like you just said, at that time in United, he overachieved with a smelly team, and he had a 36-year-old as his main striker, Ibrahimovic. Then he goes to then he goes to Tottenham, doesn't really succeed, but if he won an FA Cup there, he'll be screaming, he'll be running around, because he'll say, look, these guys haven't won a trophy since 06 Carling Cup or 08 Carling Cup, and he would pick it up. And then similar to Roma. So I think at this stage now, Mourinho just prefers the underdog tag, and then just wants his team to exceed where they are.
Do you know what? It's funny. Just hold fire on that because I think he'll get the PSG job.
I heard it's Nagelsmann, though. I think they want someone that they don't want to give too much power to a coach like Mourinho.
I think that if they can bag Mourinho, it sweetens the blow if they lose Mbappe.
I hear it.
Yeah.
And Richard, why don't you ever say this? And this is the thing about this is the narrative they do around Pep. So when Pep didn't win the Champions League, it's a failure. But when Mourinho's had good teams and he hasn't won the Champions League, there's no noise.
Yeah, but it's what you're comparing them with the expectations are, because
like Real Madrid, they were trying to win the decimal for time.
Yeah, and the thing but then back then you could argue that was a failure. But the difference is, as I said, if you're talking about at the absolute peak and at the best, I do think Mourinho's up there. But then because of the longevity of the other managers, he probably wouldn't enter those greatest coaches of all time conversation. And that's what we're comparing Pep to. We're not comparing him to just like, as I said, he should have won the Champions League with Madrid, and he didn't. But then again, and also times were a bit different back then. I think if Mourinho was still in his prime and he was still going this long, but I think with Mourinho as well, it was the fact that he was able to win it with Porto, and then he did the treble with Inter. I think with Pep's side, is 2011 Barcelona team is the greatest team of all time. People now wanted to see him do it with a team that wasn't the greatest team of all time, and I do think that is.
Wait, cool. But this is my thing. Because I know you man know ball, but I know that narrative, the greatest team of all time. But who made them the greatest team of all time? Pep didn't inherit a great team. The team that he inherited wasn't great. He bought Piqué from Man United for 5 million. Piqué was at Man United, and Ferguson weren't giving him no games. Iniesta and Xavi, the season before, they wasn't playing. It was Ronaldinho and Deco. He brought in Busquets. Then he brought in Pedro. He built that team and made them, he made them superstars. All these guys, no one knew who Pedro was before or cared about.
Are you ready for this? This is probably going to be, like I said, we chatted about it, but this is probably going to be the biggest defining moment for people to realize why Pep's the greatest. So when he was in Spain, what was Spain doing on the national side?
Exactly.
When he was in Germany, what were Germany doing on the national side? When
he
was in England, what are England doing on the national side?
To them.
It's not just that.
Whoa.
No, but I know what that's
England they do.
World Cup, Euros final. Where were they before?
literally, Sam said it, Euro, World Cup, Euro. Pep leaves, goes to Bayern. They win the World Cup. Since then, Germany haven't done anything. Since then, Spain haven't done. He comes to England.
I can't give you that.
No, you
Like,
can do. You
the
can
Spain
do.
one, the
Influence,
Spain one
though.
maybe because half the thing is
No,
Barcelona.
you can do because
Bro,
okay,
Germany
you
were playing Gertz as a false nine, and if Pep was doing that at Bayern,
put it this way. If it was any manager other than any other manager in the world, they would use that and run with it to the moon and back, and it's not even possible to do that. But it's literally a fact. The fact that this manager has gone to a specific country and they haven't just succeeded with that club on a domestic level, but internationally the club, the nation succeeded, is a actual fact. Or if they've not succeeded in terms of winning them, they've finished in a position in a tournament where they haven't finished for so many years. I always said if he goes to Italy, they will do something. Firstly, they'll qualify for the World Cup because they haven't for ages. But secondly, when they're there, they will do something amazing because the players that will be in that squad will most likely come from somewhere a school of thinking from Pep, and they'll be able to inherit that into the national team. So if anything, Pep's global reach for the nation that they're in exceeds any other manager in the world.
You know, it might be a topic that we had to do a whole video where I go and actually probably get my research and information on why I could make the argument. But as I said, I mean, if you talk about Pep greatness, it's undeniable. But obviously, we move on to the I can't remember what the topic. Yeah, we move on to underperformer and overachievers in the Premier League. So we'll probably start with the underachievers because it's easy. So who are the overachievers in the Premier League and why is it Chelsea?
I was about to say, that's wearing the t-shirt. That's wearing the shirt. We're wearing the shirt, bruv.
Listen. I said it before and I'll say it again. We had one of the best. We had if you were to call a relegation team season, this is literally multiple managers, interim, substitute teacher, whatever you want to say, multiple changes in the same lineup. You literally have no system. It was a big transitional year, but I said it before and I'll say it again. Now that we got Poch, he's also 1-0 at Old Trafford so far. He won Soccer Aid. I'm counting it. I don't care what anybody says. Chelsea managers won at Soccer Aid or at Old Trafford. But to be more serious, it was one of the worst seasons we'll have, right? But it can't get worse. And like this guy's going to have time with a lot of these players and he'll know who he wants and who he doesn't. The only problem right now we have at Chelsea is we want to get rid of some of these players, like Havertz, for example. But nobody's back.
The players we need to get rid of before we start looking at Man and Havertz.
Yeah.
Aubameyang and what's his name?
But do you know what? There'll be players that will go on cheap. The main high ticket items are Havertz and Mason Mount, and it seems like nobody wants them, or everyone knows that they can get them even more cheaper. It's just a waiting game, and that's the only problem. But realistically, yeah, Chelsea just had one of the worst seasons for a top team ever. But don't get me wrong, Tottenham also stunk it up. Like realistically, Tottenham and Chelsea had two of the worst seasons.
On the achievements, and the things I agree with you, which is why, as I said, because when the whole Poch thing was first brought to us about him taking over at Chelsea, I was a bit against the idea because obviously, you look at his resume, he didn't really do, in my opinion anyway, I don't think he did that well at PSG because you saw what they did against Madrid. Obviously, they won the league, but everybody wins the league at PSG. Then you can see he didn't win. He obviously did well at Tottenham, but he didn't bring them any success. And then you got the obvious Southampton thing. But then the more I think about it, I feel like maybe it's a thing, like, because at Tottenham, it looks like nobody's winning trophies. And even when they got Maria, they had a chance to do it with him, they seem to have sacked him. And I think if you look at Poch player development from Southampton, you can see the way, because he kind of brought up Mane and those guys at Southampton. Then you look at Tottenham, I think Harry Kane, he probably would have been world class anyway, but you can see what he did. Harry Kane, Eriksen, Dele Alli, all those. I mean, Derek Dyer was a respectable centre back when he was playing under Poch. And then obviously you go with PSG, and I think PSG probably had too many superstars and egos, which at Chelsea now is like you're bringing up a new team. There isn't that many quote unquote superstars and ego within the team, so it's a chance to then build with them and stuff. So I do like the signing of Poch, and he looks like he's going to put his foot down. I mean, he's already said no to Felix and stuff, but this season just can't happen again. As I said, it was shambles. And even though for the points that Tuchel won, we'll probably have been nearer relegation than we actually was. I mean, Potter just couldn't get it going. And the job that Frank Lampard, it was crazy. You know, I had to watch a highlight comp of Frank Lampard as a player just to remind myself that this is not the same guy, because the job that he did at Chelsea was that bad that he was unrecognized. And you know, it pains me because Frank Lampard was my most favorite player of all time, and that's the job he did on the touchline.
You know what?
Like,
This is the thing for me.
crazy.
Like, I'll always defend his first time round at Chelsea. Like, I'll say it. Like, anybody chats to me, I'll be like, listen, he got top 4 without being able to sign a single player outside of Kovacic, and that was because we got him loaned before. We lost our best player. He got top 4. He had us in the quarterfinals of the Champions League the season after when he got sacked. Like, listen, he did a successful first time, but the second time, it was a combination, because at the end of the day, we weren't going to achieve anything. He was literally brought in his first conference, like, look, I'm here for my 8 games, and then I'm going to go type of thing. So there was genuinely no motivation to do anything.
Yeah.
And that's where we stunk it up there. But yeah, man, like, it was bad. Like, he needs to do what Gerrard's doing. Get the bag, go to Saudi, and manage there.
I don't want to see him in another job because he ruined his legacy at the club.
Listen, it don't matter. He's going to get money at Saudi, bro. Like, the way they do it for Project 2030 for the World Cup, they will get Lampard as a manager.
Like, I don't think you know, I found funny. Sometimes I listen to him in the press conferences and stuff like that, and I feel like, does he realize how bad of a job he was doing? And it's crazy because I remember, like, his first time round, he had a whole thing with Lampard, Arteta, and Ole in it. And even when he was at Everton, I used to banter with Arsenal fans like, "Oh yeah, Lampard is better than Arteta because he got top for a transfer ban." You know, I don't even run Lampard banter no more because the job was that, like, towards the end of the season, I stopped concentrating on Chelsea solely because of him. And as I said, he's my favorite player of all time. And that's why I've had to watch highlights to remind myself that this guy as a player and that guy as a manager is not the same. Like, if I was to ask majority of people who's Chelsea's greatest player of all time, I'm sure a lot of people at least put Lampard in the top 3.
Yeah.
And to be getting booed out the stadium the way he was, as a Chelsea legend, the one who started us, one of the people that started our success, crazy.
No, I hear it. But like, at the end of it, you do have to split the emotion. But do you know who I blame for all of this? I blame you. Because
Me?
You did that press conference. You got sacked, and then look at us, it's your fault.
No, Potter was doing an abysmal.
Nah, I'm not going to jump too harshly on it, man. Like, this man didn't get a full proper go at it. That's what I'll definitely say. Like, he didn't get a proper go at it.
What did your favorite manager of all time say when they must have asked him about getting time and football? And he said the only way you get time is by getting results. And Potter just was not getting results. So, like, and me, especially with Chelsea, I think we've had so much success in recent years that I can't be sentimental with, like, if, for example, let's say, so you see how deep it was that Hazard left. If, for example, we've had all this success and Harry Kane was to come into the club and he goes 5 straight years of scoring 20 goals, and we win nothing, if Harry Kane said he's going to leave, I wouldn't really feel much because of the success we've had. And that's the same thing with, like, the whole Potter and Frank Lampard as a manager is, like, I couldn't really care for these guys going because they haven't done anything for the club. And I'm not one of those, like, because I think Chelsea fan base as a whole, has been ruined ever since Sarri came into the club. Like, the divide that guy caused within the fan base, whether justifiable or unjustifiable, I've never seen so many Sarri in to Sarri out. I mean, I was Sarri out in it, but I'm just saying, ever since then, the fan base has never recovered. And I feel like it's been just toxic. And now we've got the American that has come in, Todd Bowley, and it's, I don't know. But as I said, like, we all agreed that probably Chelsea are definitely the biggest underachievers, and we just hope for better next season. So, I mean, does anyone have anything else to say on how much we stunk up this season?
Nah, man, you might have said it all. Like, it was very disappointing with Chelsea because obviously we saw Todd Bowley. He came in like a blaze of fire, spending money, told the Chelsea fans it's going to happen. This is what's going to happen and whatnot. You brought in a very good coach with a lot of potential, Graham Potter. And you did say, Pep said you need to win to, keep your job, get results. But again, that is true. But you have to see the City hierarchy in his first season. They gave Pep time. Like, even though he finished fourth, cool. But
exactly,
it wasn't up to the expectations. They didn't say, "Oh, let's sack him because we brought him in to win the league and he hasn't won it." And then when he has won the league, they didn't say, "Let's sack him because he hasn't won the Champions League." So sometimes
I get what you mean, But I'm
give
saying
managers
if Potter
some time.
finished in the top 8, sorry, just to cut you off, if Potter finished in the top 8, yeah, he will still be in a job. But he was taking us to relegation, which is why he got sacked. Which, as I said, I mean, I hear you, but it's just like this is Chelsea Football Club. Like, we haven't competed for the Premier League since 2017 when we actually won it. And I've said it before, if Chelsea didn't win that Champions League in 2021, it would be looked as a very, very funny club.
Of
So,
course.
yeah.
But don't you take into consideration that, okay, Paul got sacked, yeah, and even after he got sacked, and even while Tuchel was there, the team has in the past and present was still playing smelly regardless anyway. So at that point, it didn't really matter what coach was in. Is that there was such a low form of morale and confidence that everyone was playing poor. Like I remember 2 seasons ago, I still like him. He's my guy. Wesley Fofana. I know he's had injuries, but since he's come back, he hasn't been great. Like so many players, like you see Cucurella, all these players that you thought were good, they come to Chelsea and they're not that guy. Even the signings that you just bought now,
Right.
Mudryk, Madueke, everybody. I know they're young, there's still time to improve, but no one.
I like Enzo, by the way.
You like who? Sorry.
I like Enzo, by the way, but yeah.
Yeah, no, Enzo looked good, but even the last couple of games, he was smelly, giving passes away. He wasn't effective. I just think it's just a whole reset, and they just need somebody to come in, have a little bit of authority, and hopefully it can work. Even with Poch is a very good coach. He's got a philosophy, he's got an ethos. Hopefully he's able to implement that into the Chelsea squad and make you guys perform better. But it's been a ridiculous season because I expected a lot of Chelsea. I didn't expect them to win the league, but I expected them to finish in the top 4 and have a fight at least, which they didn't. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise. You can have an off season last year, and then this year you can just kind of chill. You're gonna be in the League Cup from round 2, which is great for you guys. And you don't have to focus on Europe, so you should be good.
We'll see. And just going into who would you say has been the biggest overachievers this season in the Premier League?
For me,
I feel like there's two.
I'm gonna say Newcastle because they had money, but it's not like they bought like players that you thought, okay, cool, they're gonna do good, they're gonna finish in the top 4. And if you was going at the beginning of the season, you would have said the top 4 would have been Man United. So we'd have said Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea, and then either Tottenham, Arsenal, whatever. You didn't really have Newcastle breaking into that top 4 this season. You thought maybe if they had a few more pieces that they bought, that they probably would get into the top 4. So I would have to say Newcastle as the overachievers, because I don't think no one thought they would make the top 4 and finish where they finished. And then give an honourable mention just to Brighton based on they qualified for the Europa League, how they played with the players that they got, players they brought through. They were amazing this season. Do you know what I mean? So I would have to say those two, to be honest.
I'd probably do Newcastle, and I think Villa qualified for Europe as well.
Good one.
So based off where Villa were, what Villa did with Emery, but Brighton's another one. Like I think, yeah, it kind of speaks for itself. Like Newcastle, I kept saying it to a lot of people, and then I said, fair enough, they did it. I thought they'd fall off like Leicester would, but they did their thing, got into top 4. They look like they might legitimately be signing Barella, so they're getting stronger. They're taking legitimate targets from top teams. Fair play to them, Brighton and Villa as well. One team I'm going to mention just who also had a stinky season, but again,
Arsenal?
No, Arsenal. Leicester for me. Disappointed because like I thought Everton's time was coming, they get relegated, but yeah, no, them 3, I think it's kind of like a unanimous thing there.
Yeah, and obviously I agree with the whole Newcastle thing. As you said, coming into the season, I mean, there's a lot of crazy takes, but I don't think anybody even predicted crazily for Newcastle to be in the Champions League. And as Sam said, because I was even speaking to somewhere, I said that I even don't believe Newcastle might make top 4 next season. They were saying, but they've signed this player. And you look at their squad really and truly, they've signed mid-table players. It could be the best of the mid-table players, but regardless, it's mid-table players, and they were able to hold up teams with Liverpool. Because I think Liverpool, you could also argue is disappointing because whereas it won't be as disappointing as Chelsea because of the name and stuff. But then, I mean, Salah and Alisson and Van Dijk playing in the Europa League is kind of crazy to me. But they still held off Liverpool. As you mentioned, they overtook Tottenham. So finishing in the top four, I think, for a club of that size, whether money or no money, with the players they've had, I think has been exceptional. I mean, Callum Wilson scoring 18 Premier League goals this season. Isaac, you've got Willock, and you just got all these guys as well. And I said, very good players, probably the best of the mid-table, but it's still mid-table regardless. So,
what's his name?
yeah.
It's Dan Burn. Like literally, the entire backline is 6 foot something. Like, how is that possible? And Kieran Trippier, he betted on himself and took the risk to this thing. Like,
Yeah,
man. Like, fair play to them.
and
Like,
that's
Eddie Howe was meant to be like what Mark Hughes was for City, but I'm not saying he's going to do the Mancini thing, but he's got a bit more leg work in him now. He could possibly push a bit further on.
Yeah, and obviously the whole thing.
I think he's got a year. Sorry, I think he's got a year, and they're going to transition to find that international manager that's got the reputation that can start bringing in the bigger stars and allow them to kind of compete. Because, like, you look at the coup that they got for Isak, it's a very good deal. Because you look at, you think, why don't these other teams go for him? Yes, I know he was in that team based on injury, but when he did play and his like goals to games ratio is crazy. Yeah. And you saw the run that he did against Everton. There's so much potential in that guy. And his buyout clause at Real Sociedad was 50 million. Bro, if I was Man United and they needed a striker, I would have activated that release clause straight away. So again, done some good business in terms of getting future potential talent like Bruno Guimaraes, Isaac, a few players. But like Richard said, it's a bit, mid-level players and then players that have just improved, like Joe Linton. He's performed well in that midfield role.
The conversations around Joe Linton, because he came as a striker, if I'm correct.
Exactly. Now he's a number 8, but he's a pressing defensive. I don't even know what you want to call him. And then he created his own position as a defensive winger, like just all those type of stuff. So
and as I said as well, big shout out to like Emery Aston Villa as well, because I mean, especially with the job that Emery has done as well. When he came in, Aston Villa and Chelsea are around the same place, and you can see he spurred them into the top 6 and whatnot. So I said, really impressive. We are not throwing Arsenal in there because they bottled the league, and I mean, they've kind of put my agenda to shame. So, and besides, I think with Arsenal, when they've had that league, I said expectations change for me. So, yeah, I can't really see them as more of an overachiever than Newcastle and Villa, in my opinion. So, yeah, just has to get my Arsenal slander in there. But just on to the final topic. Actually, no, I'm going to start with the player of the season, because I do think so. I think everybody unanimously will agree that Haaland probably is the player of the season because, I mean, broke the Premier League record, he won the league, Man City, blah, blah, blah. But I would ask, who would you say, if Haaland wasn't there, who would be there instead?
Oh, easy. Odegaard. Like, for me, if Arsenal had won the league, he would have won it quite easily for me personally. Actually, no, because then it'd be a lot more closer, I'd say. Because what Haaland did was ridiculous. Because he just literally smashed the all era type of Premier League record. He killed that. But Odegaard being captain and being able to produce and get Arsenal to where they finished, I'd probably say he was the second favourite, because I don't think any other Man City player would have got it if they didn't win the league. Like, if they won the league, it was always going to be Haaland. But if Arsenal won the league, you had potentially, you could say someone like Saka, but I'd probably still stick with Odegaard myself.
Yeah.
I think it's a tough one because the way Abbas has phrased it, if City didn't win the league, then it generally would have gone to an Arsenal player. But if it wasn't Haaland,
Salah owes KDB a PFA Player of the Year for 2018, by the way.
So again,
I said Salah owes KDB another PFA Player of the Year in 2018.
Because a lot of people say De Bruyne didn't play well this season, but if you look at his numbers, if that's an off season, getting 16 assists in the Premier League and later on in the season was so influential, then I'd love to have a player that their off season is producing 16 assists and balling out. But I just think in terms of that, it's a toss up. It could have been like if for example, Haaland just got 28 goals or 30 goals, then it probably would have went to De Bruyne, because just how important he is into that team. If De Bruyne doesn't play well, in terms of supplying Haaland, we don't have a lot of players that have progressive passing. So that's why even when I look at like that Centurion team, I miss David Silva a lot, because Bernardo Silva used to be that guy, but now he likes to play, sideways put passes and backwards. And Gundogan isn't more of a through ball pass person. He's a person that likes to get late into the box and score. So, and even Foden hasn't mastered that of, finding that right ball. So in terms of influential in that team, I don't think even Haaland's more influential than De Bruyne in that team. I think De Bruyne's he's the key cog to that team, because without De Bruyne, Haaland is not going to perform to that level that he was able to perform this season.
I think Gundo could have had a shout with KDB if Haaland wouldn't have got it. But yeah, I would have found it difficult personally if Haaland wasn't winning it, that anybody else but Odegaard personally wouldn't have won it. I think he was, for me, the second favourite to win the award.
No, I mean, I how you mean? As I said, the whole Odegaard thing is interesting. 'Cause I remember I was doing like a podcast with someone else, and I actually remember him Dante in it, and I think the guys that were saying it should be Harry Kane because he scored 28 goals on a poor Tottenham team, but then I was saying Harry Kane is a serial loser in my eyes, anyways, because I mean he's part of the reason why they are where they are. Well, I won't say part of the reason, but he's involved in that thing. And if Tottenham underachieved the way they did, then I can't put him in the running. So, I mean, I think I might agree with Abbas. I think I might go with Odegaard because obviously, I think when you talk about the Arsenal players, you say Odegaard, Martinelli, and Saka. And I do feel like towards the end of the season, last 8 games, I do feel like Saka fell off to a point where he took himself out of the running, whereas Martinelli and Odegaard were still performing at a substantial standard. So I think Odegaard probably gets it for me. And I said KDB was really good as well, but as you mentioned, if Haaland is obviously it's not what's it called basketball, but it's the same reason you can even argue maybe KDB and Steph can't win MVP because you've got two greats. I think the job that Odegaard was doing from midfield, and I've said it before, if your best player is a midfielder and you're able to, I feel like it carries more weight than a striker being your best player because you expect it. So, yeah, I'm going to give it to Odegaard.
But then, sorry to interrupt, but then if we're looking at based on that metric, we know it's going to go to, for example, mostly the best player on the team that wins the league. Yeah, cool. But in this situation, we're doing hypothetical if they won the league or...
No, I'm not saying if they won the league. No, not if they won the league. But I'm saying is that I think Odegaard's season was still very good because obviously he's not going to win it. It's Haaland. So that's why we're asking who's number 2.
But then if you're doing it based on that, but then don't you have to take into consideration that 3 or 4 week span where they choked? He was part of that choking, weren't you, right?
Yeah, but I think he was part of it.
That's how things change. So it change your mindset. When you see it,
okay, but what I'm saying is that obviously they choked here, but if we're talking about, for example, let's say Saka, for example, and you said Arsenal choke, I think Saka's poor, like Saka was so poor for them stretch of games where I said that it hurts him so much in his case. I don't think Odegaard was that bad in the games that Arsenal were choking.
So as a captain, Liverpool game, you couldn't get your team to just defend that or whatever. The West Ham game, you couldn't get. You're the captain, you know. You're not just any player. You're the captain. You're meant to. He's the one that's doing huddle. He's doing huddle at halfway line against Man City. Yeah.
No, that's the Ukrainian left back. That's the Ukrainian left back.
Them man there. That's what they were doing.
And by the way, did you hear what he said?
In Southampton, come on, you have that all. That all adds to the count. I hear what you're saying, but then you look at that and you think, okay, cool. If you're that guy, you would have got the team said, "Oh, this is what we need to do to get over the line," which you didn't. But that's neither here nor there, innit? I just don't know who I would pick outside of a Man City player after De Bruyne. Maybe after De Bruyne, it might go to Odegaard, but based on what he was able to achieve, then I'm saying he's on the winning team, most assists, probably the most influential player on that team. I would give it to De Bruyne, but
fair enough. I mean, it's not a bad shout to be fair. I think KDB had a really outstanding season as well. And just lastly, pardon me, manager of the season. Look, I think this is a bit different from player of the season, just because player you just give it to the person who's been the best player over the course of the season. But I do think with manager is like not everybody would have the team to compete. So in
Yeah.
terms of who do you guys think is actually I'll just go first that one and I'll pass to you guys. I think it's between for me Eddie Howe, Pep, and Emery because of the reason I said Aston Villa and Newcastle. And I think a lot of people are going Eddie Howe just because of like the stuff that he did, like getting Newcastle in the Champions League. But the reason I'm still gonna go with Pep is because of the historic value that he had in Premier League this season. 3 peats in the Premier League is no small feat. And obviously, Man City had the best team and all that kind of stuff. But to mentally get your team to keep going year after year after year, because one of the reasons I think you saw how Man City bounced back after they lost the league to Liverpool. At least they lost the league to Liverpool, and you can say that's incentive. You know what? They've lost the league. This is a team. Man City were pushing them all the way, getting 98 points, 99 points, and losing the league. They didn't really have that this season of Arsenal going to that thing, and you're still able to motivate your team to say that even though this is not the same level, we still have to go on and do it. And as I said, 3 peats in Premier League, the second club to do it in English football is the reason I'm going to give it to Pep.
I think I hear it, but I don't want to make it very Man City centric, and that's the obvious choice, like giving it to Pep. But there's a great argument to give it to him. But I would say, based on where he came in and where the team was at that particular time, and what people expected of that team, you have to say Unai Emery, because where he took them from is exactly the same team that Steven Gerrard had, and they were smelling, they were struggling, and he was able to take them on a run where, in that time frame, their record was on par with City and Arsenal. So you have to give it to them, and they played well. And there were certain games where they could have got points, or they could have even won, but they lost. Like, for example, the Arsenal game, they could have won that game, but they ended up losing. Jorginho scored, then it ended up 3-1 or whatever, 4-1 it was. But just based on what he accomplished and where Villa was, and then to get them to qualify for Europe, playing good football, you got to give it to Unai Emery, man. I think that's the best shout.
See, I have to go Eddie, just because you mentioned where a club was when you take over, so which is fair. When Eddie took over Newcastle fans were just starving for something. A cup run, whatever.
I'm starving.
Yeah, a cup run, whatever. And let's be honest, they got to the final of the Carabao Cup, and they were unlucky because they had a lot of their main players injured, or about 3 to 4 of them. So they couldn't actually field a fully strong team against United. So you had that, and then obviously making the top 4, which is probably the biggest achievement outside of the treble. But the treble, that's a victim of his own success when he comes to that. That's why I'll give it Eddie Howe. And the other thing I'll say is British managers relatively stink comparative to international managers.
Lampard.
Pep and Unai been there, done it at big clubs. Eddie hasn't as much, and now he's at Newcastle, and the way that what he's doing right now is probably a bit more revolutionary or more impressive than probably the other two to a point. And don't get me wrong, what Pep and Unai had done their thing, but what Eddie did this season to get them where they are, considering where he took them over, is probably a bit more impressive. And I think the cup runs another thing where you can highlight as well.
Look, speaking some breaking news, allegedly they're about to
get Barella.
Yep,
yeah,
50 million. Yeah. So not bad.
He's replacing the midfield.
Pardon?
He's replacing the midfield.
I think as a starter, it's going to be Joe Linton.
Wait, is Willock a starter, in it? Is Willock a starter? Because it's Joe Linton, Bruno Guimaraes and Willock.
He played Guimaraes as a 6, like he can fluctuate from an 8 and a 6. So, well, yeah, it might be Willock then. They'll probably keep Joe Linton, and then it's Barella and Guimaraes. That's a decent midfield with those two. I think they would need another midfielder in terms of controlling the midfield. If you have a controller, Barella, and Guimaraes in midfield, that's a very, very good midfield.
I know, as I said, it's been a very, very eventful Premier League season, to say the least. Hopefully we do not get a repeat of next season. But yeah, as I said Pep, Sam said Una Emery and Abbas said Eddie Howe, and obviously we all agreed that Haaland's the player of the season, but it would be too boring, so we gave who we number 2. And as I said, Man City very, very impressive this season and stuff. Wait, hold on, just actually now, we'll save that for a different topic. I was just gonna ask about KDB's ranking in greatest Premier League midfielders of all time, but yeah,
that'll take a long time. That'll take a
yeah. We might have to we'll do a video on that in the next coming weeks and stuff. But yeah, that is our Premier League review. There will be some changes in how we cover football next season, but just keep tuned to all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, thank you for watching and tuning in. As I said, all our tags, all our social media platforms will be in the link below. And follow the platforms on outbounds_UK on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And the next video we have out will be the NBA finals or NBA review stuff. Am I correct? Yes, I am. So yeah, thank you for tuning in, and until next time. I'm trying to find the stop button, but I don't want to say safe before the stop button actually arrives.
Seems like you froze.
Oh, did I? Okay, yeah, I found the end broadcast. So yeah, as I said, until next time. Thank you for joining us. Safe.